informatics leaders, for physician leaders in general. And I would just tell you to shortcut my 27 years in informatics since the late 90s. I would say the first half of my career, I did not realize that p-values and randomized controlled trials did not change minds. When you're trying to propose new projects and go against the grain, and you're trying to get folks to adopt something new, it's not p-values that change minds. It's effectively told stories. And so that's why I think I'd like to focus on storytelling, because I've actually taken some workshops, and I'll mention the things that I've learned from, and I hope that maybe you'll take advantage of these workshops as well, because the effectiveness of changing minds comes a lot from, can you tell a human story to someone else who goes, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's so much more powerful than, but I have p-values until the cows come home. That's a very different sort of thing. Now, pairing your science with a story, that sort of trumps everything. So we'll get back to that in a bit. All right, so story skills workshop. Excellent patient care. Oh, shoot. Well, maybe if I shared my screen, you could come with me. Wouldn't that be good? Let's do that. And let me know when you can see my screen. Great.
Good.
All right. So our why is excellent patient care is our mission. Our patients and colleagues count on us. Stories are how we change minds and how we gain support for our whatever project. And how can we discover and tell these compelling stories? And preview of coming attractions, I'm going to ask you to think about a story and give you a framework for how to write it, whether it's a professional story from work, whether it's a personal story. And we'll be asking you to share it one-on-one with one other person. Or if there's a brave soul near the end, if you want to share it with a larger group, that's fine as well. I love this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Those of you who have not read it, it did win the Pulitzer? No, the Nobel Prize in Economics. And also the writing is phenomenal. It's a dense book, so don't think that you're going to sit down one evening and devour it. Rather, if you do get this book, one chapter at a time. Open up, pick a chapter, read it, discover that your brain doesn't work at all the way you thought it did. And it's a phenomenal read. No one ever made a decision because of a number. They need a story. And that's the fundamental quote from his book. So today, we're going to learn a framework arbitrarily chosen from one of the workshops I've taken called the 5C Story Skills. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes going over this framework. And I want you to draft. We're going to actually stop in the middle and give you 15 minutes of silence to draft your first story. And I'm going to give you idea prompts and also the framework. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, or you have a Word document or a blank screen to put next to this screen, we're going to give you some time to write this story, because I think it's really powerful to go and dig into your history and think about that. If you have time, because you wrote it quickly, maybe you have time to revise or improve it, but all I'm looking for is first draft of a story. Then we're going to ask you to pair up and share your story with one person, and then one or two brave volunteers to read their story to our group, and then we're going to talk about lessons learned. Okay, and then sorry for you, I have more examples of story in my life that I will be forcing on you to talk about. All right, here's the thing: we all have good stories to tell. Please let one out and share it with us. You can tell a work story or a personal story. Today, there are no bad stories. I don't want you sitting there going, oh, but I'm embarrassed to share this. There are no bad stories. Only your willingness to be vulnerable and to try something new and to find your flow. Everybody has a story. Just a matter of being vulnerable enough to write it down. Okay, this is the framework, and I will fully acknowledge Bernadette Jiwa, which I'll give you the book reference to this. But boy, if you have a chance to take her online workshop, for folks in education, I think there's a discount, but it runs about $300-ish and runs for about 6 weeks. I learned a ton from that. So I'm going to use her framework, which is a story is a character in a situation facing choices. That's it. Like, really? All these hour-long TV shows or these K-dramas that I watch for 16 hours, that's it? Character in a situation? Yes. It's a character in a situation facing stories. in detail, right? A character. Who's this about? You want to make me interested in the hero or the heroine, right? Why would I care about this person? In a situation, why should I care about this person? How small a story can you tell? And how juicy can you make it? Can you give me the senses? Can you taste it? Can you feel it? Can you see it yourself? Are there inner thoughts and struggles that this person is talking about? And can you put it on the page? Can I hear that? Put me in the action. Don't make me float above it and go, I've heard terrible stories. Well, in 2017, this happened. 2018, this happened. 2019, we finally got it resolved. Who cares? But if you can tell a small story, I was about to go into this meeting and I didn't know if this was going to go or not. And my heart is just racing. And I'm trying this new idea and I'm hoping there's an ally in there, but who knows? That's a small story, right? How juicy can you make it? So I'm telling you about my inner thoughts, but can you taste something? Can you smell the fear on my clothing? I knew they could smell the fear as I walked into that room, right? Put me in the action. And facing choices, spark an insight. Who or what is changed? Because funny anecdotes, and I tell plenty of them, are haha, that's a funny joke, or that's a play on words, but nothing changed. A true story, different from an anecdote, is this arc of the story, something changed. The hero changed, the organization changed, and we're in a better place. What changed? All right. I love this framework. It's the 5 C's: context, catalyst, complication, change, consequence. Let's go through that in a little bit more detail. Context. What's the backstory? What's the normal world that you're living in? Catalyst. What changes in the hero or heroine's world? Something happens, some external, like, oh my gosh, why did this happen to me? Complication. What's the problem or choice now because of this change that's facing your hero? And then what's the change? How does the hero, heroine overcome the obstacle, raise the stakes? How did I fail? How did I succeed? How did I have to learn something to do better? Consequence. How's the hero or heroine's character or fate or world or worldview changed? Okay, let's be concrete. Star Wars. Let's dissect the Star Wars example. So what's the context? Well, I would propose Luke Skywalker was a farm boy on a desert planet. And you got to see a few minutes of this person's life. Catalyst, what changes? And I would propose, you could go this in a couple of directions, but what changes? His parents were killed, right? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? Complication, what's the problem or choice facing the hero or heroine? An old man invited him to go save a princess. He was afraid to go. How does the heroine overcome the obstacle? He had to eventually enter a dark cave, face his fears, fight an evil master, and he returned home a changed man, a hero. Okay, so a movie in 5 acts, really little tiny phrases. And can you phrase your story in a similar? It doesn't have to be an epic story. That's a movie premiere. But what tiny story can you tell about yourself? So here's some story prompts to think about. And I'll give you more time to look this over. I'm just going to give you, these are a sample of work story prompts. And I'm going to give you 2 examples from my life, applying this 5C framework to a personal and a work example. Here's my work example. I worked as a college student in a biochemistry lab. I was running an experiment. I worried that I would miss the last subway back to my dorm. I looked at my watch. Unfortunately, the hand that also held the open test tube with 2 days of my hard work was also on that hand of the watch. When I looked at my watch, I turned it over and, oh, it's 11:30. And as I'm doing so, the contents drained on the floor. I was completely pissed off, angry and howling. I picked up the dirty, useless droplets from the floor with my pipette and put it in the fridge. It's no longer pearlescent white DNA. It's this dirty, stuff on the floor in my Eppendorf. I caught the train home. I was upset and depressed on the way home. And that was the night I decided to leave bench research and become a doctor. I was lonely. I needed human contact. Science was not enough for me. Okay. My personal story, vacationing in Hawaii. I found a ukulele in the closet. It was small. I thought it was a small guitar, and I'd never heard of such a thing. It was fun. Later, I began writing silly parody songs about the electronic health record. I sang them only for myself and my family. A year later, we actually implemented Epic. This is 2011. 1,000 doctors and nurses were angry. After a week of intense work, our red shirt support team were exhausted from fielding truly over 7,000 complaints in that 1 week. Was there something this introvert could do to relieve some of the stress? The complication, was I dumb enough to take my ukulele to work and play it for the 50-member command center? What if they laughed at me? And then change was actually them laughing at me was what I wanted, to provide some humor, give them a break. I almost didn't bring my uke that day, but I did. Played my song. There were grins all around, and since then I've written and played more songs. It's become a tradition, and this introvert realizes that making oneself vulnerable is rewarded often enough to be worth it. Okay, those are my stories. Okay, and here we are at your turn. It's 10:21. The work story prompts are there on the left. The 5C context is on the right. I'm going to leave this screen up, and we are officially in 1 minute, 10:22, going to give you 15 minutes until, help me now, 10:37
10:37, sure.
to do your writing. Okay, you're going to be sharing this with one person, not the whole group. So feel comfortable that, if it's terrible, it's one person going to think badly of you. It's one person. Okay, so let's try to do that for ourselves. And here we go.
Yeah, so I created several rooms. So I'm gonna leave it up to you, or I can
So let's
randomly.
do this. What I would like is all of us stay in the same room. If there are any questions, I will field them, but all together until 10:37. At 10:37, I'll bring us all back together, and I will ask you to put us all into rooms of 2 people.
Oh, got it. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, let's go.
All right.
10:37, we'll be back. Great. I am now looking for 2 brave volunteers to tell a story to all of us. Or even better, the partner of someone who heard a great story, you could also say, "Hey, my partner has a great story. I want him to talk." So, who wants to throw somebody under the bus for talking to us?
I'll throw Chris under the bus real quick.
Chris, you've been voluntold. Anyone else?
I'll do it.
Oh, Dion, is that right?
Yes, thank you for noticing the parens. Yes.
Oh, love it. Love it. Okay, well, let's do Chris and then Dion, and let's give you a couple minutes.
All right. So I progressed from PT to director to owner in 11 years, and I felt utterly unsatisfied, fearing I'd made a mistake in my career. This is my circuitous journey into informatics. Having achieved my dream of company ownership, I was surprised to realize the organization was largely running itself. We seemed to all be repeating the same day over and over with little proactive direction and no use of data. Nobody in the field of physical therapy had an answer to this dilemma, yet Google told me informatics. I thought to myself, that's it. If we just create the right dashboards and clinical decision support, all will be well with the organization. So I initially dabbled in informatics training, and after a year realized I needed to fully devote myself to it. So I gave up my ownership in the company and eventually committed to a full-time PhD and postdoc in biomedical informatics. But in that journey, I realized it's actually not about the numbers, it's about the people. So on the outside, I became a social sciences researcher and ethnographer. Today, now I come back to the same organization I was before all this training as the Chief Clinical Transformation Officer, but now my focus is entirely on change leadership and innovation. We still create dashboards and CDS, but always now with an empathetic design framework that people are at the center and the problems and solutions come around them.
Can I come work for you? That sounds awesome. Reactions to Chris's story in terms of the C framework, 5C framework, or specific details that you liked. What spoke to you?
I like the first what he first said, which is that he still ended up in a place where he wanted more. And I think most of us could actually relate to that as well.
Yeah, great. Love it. Any other reactions?
Chris,
All right,
I
let's
think-
move on. Dion,
Oh, I was
please.
just gonna say,
Oh, please.
beautiful way to just summarize it without getting so much in details. You know,
Yeah.
you just jam packed and it flowed very well. So it's
Yeah.
almost like listening to a podcast. Like you got the right voice for it too. So I appreciate it.
It was almost like I had a framework to follow.
Great. All right, Dion, let's have you go.
All right, my story starts actually at the beginning of my career. I'm a physical therapist. I was practicing in an acute hospital here in Richmond, Virginia on the cardiothoracic surgery ward. The cardiac surgeons at the time had 4-hour bed rest protocols for a procedure when external pacemaker wires were pulled from the chest. They were moving to a 2-hour protocol, all but one of them. I inadvertently violated the one stuck with the 4-hour protocol. I violated the bed rest protocol by performing some exercises and activities with a patient because it wasn't documented in the chart that any of this had happened. This surgeon was a bully and would yell and scream and berate people in public to the point where some would cry on the floor. So those people were willing to cover it all up for me to protect me. I paged him because I figured he'd find out and said, I need to meet with you to talk to you about a patient of yours. And he said, well, I'm in my office, come on down. And so I walked in and said, I have to tell you something that I think is going to make you really unhappy. And so he said, what is it? And I told him what happened. And he looked me in the eye and said, did you kill him? And I said, no. And I gave him the clinical data that showed that the patient, in fact, had an appropriate exercise response, was asymptomatic and did fine. And in response, he asked me to sit down so he could explain why he was the only one in the group who was holding on to the 4-hour protocol. Turned out that as a fellow, he lost a patient with the more aggressive protocol and he was not going back. So from that, I learned a couple of things. First of all, I learned that surgeons are sometimes afraid. And that was a revelation as a young professional because really they all carry themselves with a great deal of confidence. I learned that professional accountability is a thing, and it was something that I really needed to hold on to be a good physical therapist, an excellent physical therapist. And I learned that being vulnerable professionally sometimes invited others to be the same.
I'm going to cry. Wow. That's amazing. We should publish a book.
It was pretty breathtaking to
This
have
is
him. I mean, if you could
incredible.
see this man on a rage up on the floor when things didn't go his way, the fact that he had the exact opposite response to me still, when I reflect on it, is astounding, because his default to cover his fear was to be angry.
I am astounded that we all carry these amazing stories in us. And with what I gave you a scant 12-ish minutes, and here you are. That's thank you. Thank you for that. And other reactions, please.
What
Yeah,
I loved about her, oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I loved about her story was that, kind of the details. I could really see you like on the floor, and then I could see you walking into the office. I could almost smell the coffee as you walked into his office, and I had like an image of like this kind of grumpy looking doctor, behind a desk in his white coat. And I could then see kind of the transformation where maybe, he uncrossed his arms or something. So it was just like very well described, and felt like it really kind of took me to that moment there with you. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's a great observation. Thank you. Others?
Yeah, I really appreciate your summarization. I learned, I also learned, and it wasn't just tidbits. It actually brought it all back together.
Yeah.
It was nice to bring you into the moment with the more right side of the brain and feeling, and then out of the end of it, you said, and here's what I got out of it.
Sam, we have 2 chapters of the book we're all going to write together right here. We're on our way. This is incredible. This is
Got the right
incredible,
stakeholders.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, we live these stories all the time, and we just brush them aside. I got to go home, dinner, let's get up and do it tomorrow. I mean, we're living these incredible stories. Well, thank you. I thank you for the 2 brave souls who decided to speak in relative public about this. I'm going to bring it back to me, because this talk is all about me, and I'm going to continue on, right, with your permission. Okay, so this is our story outline. We did this. My turn again. I have 4 quick stories. My 16-year journey to open notes, information blocking and anticipatory guidance, EHR burnout and sprint, and then from challenge to book club. So here we are. This is 2001. If you imagine a researcher, and no, this is later. This is a picture of me later. But I have my Pollyanna little hat thing going on up here with the green things. Like, hey, you know what? I just did a research study, randomized controlled, 100 patients in a cardiology practice, 50% to usual care, but 50% of these patients got full access to the entire medical record, all the progress notes, all the test results, real time. This is 2001, where like nobody does this. And when we actually went to the cardiology practice and said, we propose this study in your practice, 3 of the doctors were like, yeah, information transmit, good idea. I always copy the CC the patient on my dictated progress note. That seems reasonable. And then 4 were against it. And 1 was so much against it, he actually said to me, the only reason I'm going to do this research study with you is because it looks like you're going to do an academically rigorous analysis. And at the end of 12 months, you will know exactly how bad an idea this is. Like, wow, thank you. I appreciate it. And let's proceed. And actually, this is the same guy who at the end, forecast at the end, who said, I think this makes me a better doctor. Same guy. Like, wow, this guy came a long way. So anyway, I started with this. I published it. And in 2001, I took the research study. I said, look, I have p-values. It's a randomized control. I'm going to take it to all the medical leaders of my organization and say, our open notes project with all these test results, online communication, it worked great in this fairly sick cohort of patients in cardiology. I'd like this to make the system standard here in 2003 across the University of Colorado. And I thought that I would be talking to medical leaders who are like open-minded residents ready for the next thing. And what I walked into was a leadership room of colleagues. And you might imagine they're like, what is this all about? Well, why do we have to be the first ones to do it? Who else has published on this? Just you? Just you? Really? What kind of crazy ass idea is this? You know the medical record's a dangerous place, right? I write things in there that are dangerous. I write it for me and my colleagues because we have deep thinking to do. You want me to like rechange this into like layperson language and like double my work and get thousands of phone calls? Oh, you say that no increase in phone calls in your study? Yeah, those are simple patients in cardiology. I have complicated, really sick psychiatric patients. It's not going to work in my practice, okay? All right, thanks. And I walk out of that meeting going, wait, I had good p-values. Wait, this is what just happened, right? And it was a decade later that someone goes, you need to read this book. And I'll tell you, if you haven't read this book, read this book. If you're doing any leadership anywhere in healthcare or anywhere, read this book. I did not do half of the chapters in this book. And as I read it, I'm like, oh, that's why that didn't work. Oh, I didn't set a sense of urgency. Oh, I didn't have a good coalition backing me up. Oh, so I'm supposed to do that? Is that part of the thing? And so anyway, just an idea. So I actually went back 16 years later, having been distracted by other EHR projects. And this is how I laid out my marching orders. This is 40 clinics, one by one, convincing people so that I tried again in 2016, 16 years later. I had 7 friends running 7 primary care practices, got them to volunteer. They got their clinics on board, ran this for 6 months, 0 concerns across 30,000 patients. Take that story on the road. Positive stories, lack of problems, big roadshow, every medical leadership meeting. I had a cadre of chief medical officers and the patient family centered committee, like all the visionaries line up behind me. And then I communicated that we are a transparent organization. Are we not? Oh, you're not a transparent clinician? No, you're against us? Well, I mean, isn't it mom and apple pie to be transparent with our patients? And then I set an artificial date of May 16th, our next Epic upgrade is only going to come with open notes, right? Either we have you go early because we can give you extra support, or you could wait till the last minute and we'll all pull the trigger on the same date in May. Which one will it be? I gave you artificial choices. There's no choice that says no, right? And so at the end of that, we went forward. So the character in a situation facing choices, it's me in a situation where can I get my organization to adopt open notes? And facing choices was I changed myself in my skill level and learned how to adopt leadership principles, right? Other examples, you can actually make story really small. This is my one pager. One of the things I like to do in teaching my mentees is, can you get your project on one side of one piece of paper? Can you convince people leaving aside that, of course, I'm putting this in 6-point font, but I'll call out the Robert Breeze quote here. When I order imaging, here's the context. The context is information blocking in 2021, we're actually having to tell people, no, you can't delay pathology results for 14 days. You can't delay CT scans for 7 days. You have to bring them all the way down to no minutes and release them immediately. And then I have to tell them, when I order imaging or pathology specimens, I've already discussed with the patient the possibilities, including cancer and what we will do next. Patients deeply appreciate these discussions. And I've been doing this for years and patients are rarely surprised. Right. So now you can tell these short, tiny stories and say, here's a vision of the promised land. I know you're facing an uphill climb, but there are people on the other side. And let me show you what that is. So stories can be as little as this. The top part of the document is, I know you're facing all these things. I know you're not wanting to do it. Sorry, it's a requirement now. And here's someone who's done it. A character who's a clinician, unhappy with immediate release, facing the choices. Here's a way to do it. Work examples. I'm trying to sell the idea that a sprint team can go in and optimize an entire clinic, but that's expensive to hire 10 people, 9 people, whatever it is. How are you going to do that? And initially, I'm showing stuff on the right side of my one-page document. Look, my net promoter score is this, and the teamwork score goes up, and the evening percent spent in the evening goes way down. And I'm like, oh, fine. But then you put the quotes in. Hey, sprint goes a long way to not improve operations, but also make people feel heard and engaged. Physician, you just blew my mind. Physician, I'm a better person now. Physician, I no longer seek early retirement to escape the EMR. I love this one. You all come in here like a secret organization. It's like a room filled with hackers in here, right? So you tell these stories and people are like, you're changing people's lives. It's just not a change in number of minutes of pajama time. Like, why can't we continue with something big like this? Character who is a hospital leader facing a situation, this is expensive, and should I support this? Let me pause for a second because I have an unanticipated conflict in my schedule. I stole from a New York Times article about a bookstore somewhere in Oregon who actually puts random posters out. One of the workers liked reading books so much that she puts posters like this out about her favorite author. And so I stole this for informatics. Where do you keep the pixie dust? How do I do informatics? And is there a book for that? And can you tell a story in like one graph, right? How do I get to the next level? Well, leading change. How can I be a servant leader? Did you read Good to Great? How can I listen so my colleagues understand more? Crucial conversations. All the way out to the right side. How do I not be blamed for stuff? Yeah, go find a different field, right? So how do you tell funny stories like this to sort of give people, so it's not just a static, here's a book club list. You kind of tell like why this is important. And stories can be little tiny things just like this. How do you build that into your routine communications? Characters, an informaticist in a situation, teaching others how to become an expert, and facing the choices is, can I read a book? And how do you think about that? So this is my last slide, right? Excellent patient care, stories, how we change minds. The question is, were you entertained? Have you seen an example of how stories work in leadership? Have you learned a skill to take away? And I'll point out that my logo is here front and center. Physician and APP Informatics Group. I love version 17 of our vision is we improve physician and team wellness and effectiveness by building extraordinary relationships and innovative tools. And then the logo, I had a really good time. So if you've not signed up for nounproject.com for little icons for free, or for $19 a year, you can search for any concept like strategy, and it'll come up with these fantastic logos. So something to think about. So I put this, I call my group the Large Pig, which is Physician Informatics Group. And yes, some of my members dislike being called a pig, but too bad, I'm your leader. So the pig, looking at the screen, faces difficult puzzles and uses relationships to solve problems. That's my logo. Okay. Some of the books are over on the right side, Thinking Fast and Slow, Leading Change. Bernadette Jiwa's, if you have a chance to take the Story Skills Workshop, that's phenomenal. So, but she encompasses some of the 5 C's in this book, what great storytellers know. There's a whole other framework for writing stories, and Randy Olson, who is a tenured professor of marine biology, decided he needed to learn how to tell stories. He quit his job and went to Hollywood to become a screenwriter. And then he wrote about what he learned in Houston, We Have a Narrative. I think you'll love that story too. And he talks about the one-word story, the one-sentence story, the one-paragraph story. And I think that's really kind of a fun thing to do. And that's it. Well, one more, YouTube. I learned this when this was in high school. Okay, this is 1970s, 1980s material, but PBS had Bill Moyers, back then a journalist, interviewed Joseph Campbell, who wrote books on the hero's journey, the hero with 1,000 faces. The books are really super dense, but these interviews, which are all on YouTube, are phenomenal. There are 5 episodes of an hour each where Moyers sort of digs into Campbell's expertise about storytelling. And Joseph Campbell's argument is there's really only one story. Everything is the derivation of one storyline. And it's just people being creative about how to tell that story. So it's kind of a cool thing. So I will stop there and see what people have to say.
Dr. Lin, I think you just saved us so much time and roundabouts of this massive challenge in our storytelling. And thank you so much. Wow. I'm just digesting some of the resources that you have recommended. I'm wondering if I could ask this question as we're thinking through this. Storytelling is, we know it's important. In fact, there's a ton of like blogs and information out there. And, just can't help but to think about even just the evolution of like AI. You got ChatGPT. And do you foresee where you got this data set, you don't know how to interpret it, but you're really good at just getting the data. but the storytelling is a challenge. Is there a way where you foresee this, like get this data and somehow the machine learning recommends and guides us, even though that's potentially a dangerous path if we're not fully understanding of the data set and what we're trying to convey the message. If you're not fully understanding of the data, do you foresee any of that happening where there's a lot of independent learning and guidance from the machine learning and the AI and to give us that kind of feedback?
Yeah, I'll just say that I give another talk on
Yeah.
big data and AI, and chat and GPT-4 are, I think, going to change the landscape for us in unanticipated ways. I think there's some downsides to it, and also be careful what you ask for. Right? Are we going to incorporate chat into Epic, and then chat starts to hallucinate answers where the clinician's not looking carefully and going, yeah, close enough, and send. And like now we're giving like not quite right advice. And on the surface, it's great, but then you read it some more and you go like, wait, this person's suicidal. And then you're going to ask them to do what now? And did we take all those into account? And are we giving away our human expertise to the machine that is pseudo fluent, right? It looks fluent, but what's underneath it? There's no knowledge underneath it. And so I'm worried that if we run too quickly, this will be the case. Now, we can also run too slowly where the FDA gets all interested in regulating everything. And now you have to prove that you've satisfied all the diversity, equity, inclusion standards and all the biases are removed. And by the way, you need a 3-year study to make sure the biases are removed before you take the next step. I mean, we can do this all kinds of different terrible ways. So really interesting. You know, if you talk about the adoption curve of the peak of overinflated expectations, yeah, we're all standing on this peak right now. And what's coming is the big crash down into the valley of despair. Like, will we ever climb out of this thing? And then the eventual years-long plateau of productivity where we figure out what the things are actually good for. That's like quite a ways away. And people are going to explode in different directions. And who knows? Just hang on for your dear life. This is like the moment where Steve Jobs introduces the iPhone, right?
Oh.
And then suddenly, you know, smartphone mania has destroyed our culture and we don't know what to do with it still now. And I feel like this is one of those phase changes where like, what the hell do we do with this thing? So that's kind of interesting too.
Oh.
Now I'll say this at the end of my talk, there is a silver lining. Well, I'll do the giveaway, right? There's a term called stempathy that I think Thomas Friedman cites in his book, Thinking Fast, called Thank You for Being Late. It's a terrible title for a book because he talks about globalization, climate change, and the AI acceleration all coming together. And one of his conclusions is stempathy. If you want your job to be one of the last ones to go away because AI is coming for everybody's job, right? It's stempathy. It's science, technology, engineering, math, being well grounded in those, but then having your job be in a large part empathy and relationship skills, because that's going to be the hardest thing for the AI to really get human connection in a fundamental way. I think we will, for the foreseeable future, not maybe forever, but be ahead of the AI in those sorts of relationship building skills. And part of that is storytelling and convincing each other to work together. So
Great,
now,
thank you.
unless there's another question, I do have a song to play for you. Unless there's other questions, yeah?
I'll throw one question at you. I mean,
Please.
in the world of physical therapy, I feel like that physical therapists definitely have that emotional connection with their patients, those types of things. But then when it comes to documentation and informatics, it's like we really miss the boat. We have a hard time having systems that are able to capture detailed information that we can look at and reuse and help explain the value of our services that we provide. Thoughts on how to, get, obviously storytelling, is one of the things that I can see, obviously, to help bridge that gap. But really, how do we bridge that gap to get the physical therapy community to start realizing how important informatics is when there's really no incentive to do it. It's
challenging question. I have a couple thoughts in reaction. I'll just give you some random thoughts. It's not a coherent set of thoughts, but too bad. That's what you get from me. One is that one of the frameworks that we use for progress notes for us at UC Health is inverting the SOAP note into an APSO note. right? So if you have a lot of regulatory documentation, like we did with physicians, typically a half-page progress note that would be hand scribbled is now a 17-page. You watch me blow all the stuff into my note to prove to you that I did a lot of thinking. Here's a 7-page past medical history. Here's a half-page, family history. Here's a review of systems that's a page and a half. And by the way, somewhere on page 14 out of 17 is my actual thinking, the assessment and plan. But don't look at the last page because it's all signatures and timestamps, right? How hard can you make it for like the nugget of the thing I want to teach you? And so we inverted the progress note from SOAP note to an APSO. The first thing on the page is, this is my assessment of patient's status right now, and this is what we're going to do next. And then I start with subjective, objective, and then you go through the rest of the documentation. I don't care at 17 pages because in the first half page, I've summarized for you what I'm really thinking. And I could challenge that physical therapy. If you have regulatory documentation for range of motion is 17 versus 18 degrees and all the tables that you have to put in, fine, leave them there. Put at the very top, my final assessment is this person is still at least 7 days away from discharge, and these are the things that are holding them back. Like, thank you, I love it. It makes a lot of sense to me. So in terms of communicating from an interdisciplinary standpoint, how can you surface the nugget of the best part of the note to be the first thing people see? That's one idea. In fact, one of the colleagues who gave an epic talk from England actually took chart review and gave them a tweet length summary. I'll give you 140 characters, the original tweet length, to summarize your progress note that you attached here. You have 140 characters to summarize what you just said. Not ready for discharge, needs walker and oxygen. Game over. I don't need to read your note. That's beautiful. Can we insist that every clinician tweet a summary of their note? Can we be much better partners in that way? And actually, Sam, to your point, can we ask Chat GPT to do the 140 characters? Game over. Wow, that's fantastic. Can you write the discharge summary for me in a tweet fashion? I mean, all these things that we can be thinking about of how do we communicate better, right? That's kind of interesting. From a data standpoint, that's a whole different conversation about are we measuring even the right things, right? So if we go back and look at the history of even PHQ-9, right, the instrument that we use for depression, that was one person's copyrighted way of assessing depression. It's not even very good. We've even heard people, and this is another person in England I talked to who said, we've actually combed the data for the right questions to ask. We have an instrument way better than PHQ-9. We haven't published it yet because you can comb the data and figure out what is a good predictor for outcomes and then link it back to the questions that were asked. Now we have another set of 12 questions that are completely different. And why are you doing it the old way, right? It was just one person's guess and we just locked that in because that's what we're used to. No, we should be looking at the data and thinking about what's the right thing. So to that point, in PT, is range of motion the right thing to be measuring? Just because we have always done it that way, that's a standard. Can we blow it up and say, it's time to take all your assumptions and throw them away. Let's look at the notes we're writing. Who's got good outcomes? What are you measuring? What are we not measuring because that person's doing it, we're not doing it? Can we say, let's try that. Let's do a whole bunch of tiny little experiments and then come up with one where we go, there's signal there. There's something interesting there. Let's pursue that one. Heck with the standard of care. Well, not heck with the standard of care, but can we put that in the background and surface something else and not assume anything about what we're doing?
I love that answer, Dr. Lin. I think unanimously, I think we all agree. What are we collecting? Does it make sense? We've been the traditional, the objective measures that we've been collecting for years. What are we reusing it for? Are we even doing anything with it? Those are really hard questions to ask, but I think we need to hear more of that. And I love how you summarized that for us. Thank you.
One of my colleagues, Bonnie Adrian, has a project she calls Project Joy. And our nurses spend hours checkboxing all of the things that are normal. This is within normal limits. This is within normal limits. And then, pop that open. There's 17 more within normal limits. And I click, 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 click. No one looks at those notes. Who looks at those notes, doctor? Oh, there's notes? Because we've suppressed all those. We hate those notes. It doesn't teach me anything. The one sentence of, I was really worried about, and I paged this doctor and they didn't come down. I want to know that. Heck with your 4,700 flow sheet rows. And so we are slashing and burning right now, all the nursing flow sheets. And we're getting into trouble with regulators because you didn't show the 37. Well, no, what do you want? Do you want better communication? You want me to check your box? And so we're trying to argue aggressively at a national level to say this is no longer the right standard of care. We disagree that this is the right thing to do, and we're actively trying to change that. So we're getting nursing back to the bedside. And can we do things like, hey, the AI can actually watch me turn the patient in bed, so you can check the box for me. Did you turn the patient today? Well, the camera saw me doing this action. We can teach it that the cameras, when you see this, check the box for me at this time. Right. So how can we take advantage of the new tools and decrease the burden and get people back to doing the right thing?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. It's kind of piggybacking on the last one, and I think it has a lot to do with our documentation is geared around the audience it's intended for. Is it the clinician following you? Is it the insurance claims reviewer? Is the interdisciplinary provider that might need to interpret your note? But then also my question for you is piggybacking on what you just mentioned, all the data that's going in the chart may not necessarily be used currently, but someone put it in there because they wanted to track it at some point. What do you look for as an indicator for putting it in the chart to be collected now? We don't know how it's going to be interpreted versus it may be beneficial to have in the future.
The burden of EHR documentation is so extremely on the wrong side that almost everything now that when we say we're going to add something, it's prove to me that you're going to use it now and that it will be useful. The burden is not on, theoretically, we'll want these 50 questions. Let's just throw it in there. Someday we'll use it. A, no one will fill it out. B, the burden is so extreme that navigating through the theoretical checkboxes to get to what's really important means that I am less likely to capture the critical things because I'm distracted with all these other options. New grad nurses coming out saying, what is this 1,000-line thing that I'm supposed to do for an intake? And the nurse and the hardened nurses go, you just scroll to the bottom, these 5 questions, and that's all you need to do. And so just because you put it in there doesn't mean everyone's going to fill it out. And what's worse is we're now pushing this all down to the patient level. Don't worry, the patient will fill it out. And patients are coming to us going, do you not respect me? Like, I filled out all the things and then I send it in and I come to the clinic and I go, so what about all those answers I gave you? They're like, oh, we don't look at that. We don't look at that. You're like, why do I even come here? Right. So there's a disrespect implied in the, don't worry, let's set up the future for theoretically this might be useful. We have coned that all the way down to we are slashing and burning like crazy, and we'll only save your thing from the wood pile if you prove to me you're already using the data effectively, or this is a crucial regulatory item. There's only a couple things that are going to save you from the slash and burn at this point. And then when you come up with a good idea and you can run a pilot study enough where that in the ENT practice, this is so useful, but we're doing it on paper. Can we please put it electronic? You show me the data that you got a 97% adoption. Okay, there's something there. You care about it so much that you're doing the long way and I can help you with a shortcut. That's a very different feeling from, as my other favorite non-good example was one of our cardiologists said, we theoretically, we should do exercised minutes per week. We should make a mandatory hard stop for all primary care practices to capture days exercised per week and then minutes exercised for every one of those days. And then we can do the multiplication and come up with the days. That should be a mandatory vital sign. I'm like, you're a cardiologist. Yes. And you're going to want primary care to do this. Yes. We have 2.5 million visits a year. You're going to have people spend time to do that on all the visits because theoretically this will help your research study? Well, yes. Yeah. Just make them do it. Like, okay. When you get a signed affidavit from all the primary care leaders that they want to do this with you, come back and talk to us, right? And we haven't heard from this guy 2 years later. I mean, so how do you think about what's the right thing to do in terms of data?
I think we can conclude here. There's probably a lot more questions that we can interact with, but we really want to hear you, the musical side of you, Dr. Lin. We've been anticipating you.
Okay, you asked for it. Now it's going to be your problem. Here it is. So this is a song that I sang in 2011, and there's a story in here, if you can hear it, of writing EHR parody songs. And so in support of the folks who were beaten down by the physicians complaining, I sang them this song. There is is a hospital in Colorado they call the rising sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor doc, and God, I know I'm one. For the only thing that a doctor needs is a paper sheet and a pen to write a prescription hard to read, an error on its way he sends. One day we saw computer screens replacing those old charts. The floor swarmed with eager red shirts, no place for us old farts. At first, we had a tough old time. Med rec was done, but on whom? We were not so sure that we would survive, heading back to our call rooms. Oh, mother, tell your children not to do what I have done. I've ignored those alerts and reminders in the hospital of the rising sun. But then something changed in the air one night. Those handoff errors, we had none. No bad handwriting in those charts in the hospital of the rising sun. Oh, I got one foot in my deep, dark past and one foot in the car. I'm going back to Colorado to be an epic star. Oh, there is a hospital in Colorado they call the rising sun, and it's been the savior of many a poor doc, and God, I know I'm one.
Thank you so much. Wow, this is a true gift of gifts. Just having you here from start to finish. Dr. Lin, we are really grateful. I'm personally grateful that you have responded to my email a few months ago, and two, that you're willing to come here and join us. If there's any way we could help you in any way, please, as you have impacted our lives today, even just the way that we're going to go back to our respective places, data storytelling, but beyond that, just problem solving and the way that we're going to connect with people, the humanizing care. Thank you so much for.
Yeah.
Gosh,
it's my pleasure. You know, one thing you could do, some of you know that I write a blog, ctlin.blog, and I publish something weekly, and I occasionally will have guest bloggers. And if any of you on the larger group from earlier are willing to share one of your stories that you wrote, I think these are compelling stories. And I would love to have any of you as a guest blogger. So let me know, and happy to do that with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. This was a lot of fun for me.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, Bob, any comments? Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lin.
Okay.
We'll be in touch, and
All right.
appreciate your support and your willingness and your professionalism.
Great. Fight the good fight.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.